Welcome to the High School Basketball Coaching Podcast. My name is Josh Morse. My guest today is Moody Bey, head coach of Kip Academy out of Lynn, Massachusetts. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You're a legendary coach already. You were a JV coach 2 years ago. Last year was your first year as head coach at Kip Academy. You were a playoff team and then ending up as coach of the year.
Yeah, so I think it's best that I start when I was a JV coach. Some of the best advice a coach gave me was treat wherever you are at, treat that like the big leagues. So when I was a JV coach, I didn't treat it like we were playing in front of 10 parents and it was a meaningless game in terms of record. There's no playoffs for JV. I was on the sideline coaching really hard, being emotionally invested into the game. And really, like I said, just treat it like it was the big leagues. I treat it like I was at the Boston Garden, Game 7. And I imagine that's the same energy and effort I would take to approach any game I coach, So when I made that transition to varsity, I think the players benefited from that because I held them to such high standards. As a JV coach, we were watching film, which is like, kids, I think back on it, I'm a little crazy, but I think that helped some of those kids who came up with me from JV to varsity develop. And I think it helped me. By the time I got to varsity, I've already felt like I was a varsity coach because I was taking all the steps to prepare. I was drawing out practice plans. Like I said, I was watching film. I was trying to do some scouts. Coming into Kip, it was a unique position for a simple fact that it was the first year after the shutdown. So on our roster, which was probably not unique, we had one kid who had played any varsity minutes. So we were a really, really young team. And to be really blunt, we were really, really bad. We won 3 games that first year. But I think there was some benefit to that. One, we realized that we could try a bunch of different things. There's a benefit to being a 3-17 team that a team that might be 9-11 or 10-10 might not have because they can't afford to make that mistake. They can't afford to try something new. They can't because, there's small room for error. When you know that, hey, we're going to be pretty bad or we're really pretty bad, let's try some crazy stuff. Let's try this defense. Let's throw this freshman in. So I think there were some advantages to that. And two, really appreciating any progress we had. Going from a 3-1 season to a 13-1 season meant the world to the kids. We had the chance to really build from the ground up, Coaches always talk about culture and some of those key words, but, we really had to build that culture. I mean, I had kids who didn't know how to sub in and out of basketball games, line up for the national anthem, so when you talk about that culture, going from that where it's, all right, hey, you have to go to the table to check in. Hey, when they're singing the national anthem, we're going to line up this way. Now we get to get into the fun stuff. All right, now, hey, 15 minutes before practice, I need you guys to be stretched out. And, so now you could really, it's really a blank canvas. Right. And I benefited from that a lot.
Let's take a step back and go all the way back to your playing days.
Okay.
Talk to me about how your high school experience, your collegiate experience at Westfield State prepared you to start the coaching process, and what elements do you bring from that as a player to either relate to your players and help them, or what you learn from a coaching standpoint?
That's a really good question. From high school, I scored 500 points my senior year. Really, really talented player in high school. So, learning to be a star player, and then going to college where you kind of start fresh again and you're a freshman and you're fighting for playing time. I think that between my senior year of high school and my senior year of college, I've really started to sculpt a holistic picture of what a basketball player is. You get to see from the star player, you get to see from being on a good team to being on a bad team, to you just get to see everything, being a role player to you get to see the whole picture. And my playing experience, especially in college, was unique compared to some of my teammates. A lot of my teammates, they were trying to play overseas, and they never thought the basketball was going to stop bouncing. Right. Whereas I always I was like, hey, the next step for me is going to be a coach. That's really what I want to do. So I was viewing the game since college as a coach, to the point where my senior year, where they trusted me with some of the advanced scouts, and so that changed my lens. So I was able to see it from the coach's standpoint, the player standpoint. I was able to relate to star players, relate to players who aren't playing that much, relate to players. My senior year at Westfield State, I had three kids who scored 1,000 points, and the rookie of the year in our starting five, and then me. So really being able to see, hey, all 5 of these pieces are, if you talk about the whole roster, all 15 of these pieces are really important to winning a championship. And I'm not sure if I wasn't a player, would I have been able to realize that? Hey, that kid who's averaging 4 points and 4 rebounds, we need him, and hey, that kid, that freshman in practice who feels like he's ready to play right now, right? He's busting his butt every day in practice. He's wicked important to this team. He's showing up every day in practice, ready to play, ready to compete, to show, whether it's to himself or to the coaches or to the team, that he's ready to play now. And, so I think playing really just allows me to see things from a lens that not many coaches have seen.
Does that allow you to more closely connect with your players, having that closeness of leaving your playing career to coaching?
Yeah, I would think so. And contrary to what my players think, I'm not that old. I could relate to a lot with them. Like I said, having a coach, even having mentors, but also playing. I and some of my men's leagues, I'll go and I'll say, hey, can we run this offense that I'm going to implement with my team, so I could see it firsthand. Defenses. All right, hey, we're forcing baseline. This is what we're going to do, and so I get to see it firsthand as a player as well, because I'm young enough to get out there and play with the kids and, play in my men's league. That relationship of being a younger coach, that's incalculable.
Especially as you're building the program.
Yep.
You're coming in ground level. You're teaching every aspect of the game. And as a young coach, you're growing and building with those players yourself. Talk to me about how you prepare for a season, knowing that it's your first season.
It was important to me that we instill some key values. I didn't want to lock ourselves down to skill sets where it's like, hey, we're going to shoot a bunch of threes. These are going to be our core principles, and we're going to stick to this no matter what. So some of those things were, I want it to be the toughest team in the gym and the hardest working team in the gym. If you came to 90 High Rock Street in Lynn, you're going to be in for a long 32 minutes. As the season went on, we were able to find that our toughness helped us, float along until we closed that skill gap. Early in the season, I was just trying to teach them how to compete, have pride. And, funny enough, you talk about these things, they just sound like buzzwords, but they show up in places that you don't think they'd show up, right? So, you're thinking having pride, and it's a kid taking a charge or a kid dive on the ground. I realized that some of the stuff that was breaking through to the kids off the court, right? So kids showing up to practice early. One of the things that used to really tick me off was how we dressed to games. I saw kids showing up in pajama pants, and later in the season, you talk about having pride. Sure. They're wearing their Kip gear, they're wearing their best sneakers, they're getting haircuts, and it's like, all right, everything's kind of clicking, and that translates onto the court. And now, that sense of pride, that sense of ownership. And as you mentioned, being a young coach, I'm not asking kids to buy in. I'm asking kids to help build in. So this Kip team, or whatever team I coach, it's theirs. It's not mine. I'm going to help them every way I can, but they only can take out what they put in. So they really take ownership because they help build us.
At what point last year did you know that your team had sort of turned a corner in terms of realizing that level of toughness, that level of expectation that you had for them?
Yeah, so we started off 1-5, and then we ended off 12-4, right? So we went on a nice little streak, but there was this one key game we were playing the reigning league champs, Nobody thought we had a chance except the 12 guys in the locker room and the 3 coaches on the bench, But we realized, like, hey, like, we have what it takes to be a good team. It was a home game. It was a Friday night game. Really great atmosphere. They had the player of the year and the league champs. They were a stacked team, really good team. But we just really took it to them for 32 minutes. And that's when we realized, hey, if we show up like this, I like our odds against anybody.
How do you utilize or incorporate your assistant coaches? What is that dynamic? And are you learning too in the process of them and each other?
Definitely. So I think, a part of me I don't like to say I won coach of the year. We won coach and staff of the year. My coaching staff was amazing. I had my older brother, Moody Bey, who was a 2,000-point scorer in high school, 1,000-point scorer in college, full scholarship, all that. I had Bahu, who played at Westfield with me, and I had a teacher at Kip Academy who had a really good relationship with the kids, and the kids respected him. So, we can't ask as coaches, you can't ask the kids to push their ego to the side if you're not going to do the same. I trust that I have the right people around me to help me, and I hired them for a reason. I trust them for a reason. That if they say something, I'm not gonna just I'm the head coach. I push my ego to the side. If they're saying something, there's some truth behind it, and I take that into deep consideration.
So there's adaptability, there's flexibility in that process. In terms of your coaching style, how would you describe it? Did it evolve during the season? And how did that replicate into wins?
I want to have the hardest working team in a gym. I think it starts with the coaching staff. So there was no game that we were unprepared for in terms of knowing what the other team was going to run. There was no secret surprise. I did a really good job, and my staff did a really good job of getting out into the field, watching other teams play, prepare. So I think the kids seeing that somebody else is taking that sense of ownership. If coach is doing that, then the least I could do is pay attention during film session, or at least I could do is show up 15 minutes earlier practice, or and I think just like the top-down approach where it's like, I'm not going to ask anything of you that I won't do myself. So if something spills, I go and clean up the court, and just I think that's my coaching style is, hey, I'm going to ask you to do a lot of things, and I'm going to ask you to work really hard, but just know in return I'm going to do the same. I'm going to work really hard.
You're down 2, you're up 2, tight game. What are you telling your players?
Telling kids to trust your training, right? Whatever we do, we're doing it with confidence because we've been in this situation before. The last thing I would ever want is our kids to make a fatal mistake in a game because they weren't confident. I'm okay. I'll give you an example. It's the fourth quarter, a really, really close game. I call a timeout. I draw up a play. And I'm like, hey, we're going to do this, that, and the third. And inbound it. 1 pass, 3. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not what we draw up. So I instantly blow another timeout. And I'm really, really mad. I'm like, hey, what are we doing? Coach, I thought I was going to make it. Hey, you're my guy. We're going to trust that. We're going to roll with you, right? So I'm okay with kids making mistakes or not. I'm just telling them, hey, whatever we do with confidence, and we're going to support each other. We're going to play hard. We're going to play for each other, and we're going to play with confidence. That's it. Whatever mistake we make or whatever the outcome of the game is, as long as we could look back and those 3 things or those 3 boxes are checked off, I'm okay with that.
And you're willing to live with some of the other mistakes for them trying based on your core principles.
Yeah, and we had games where we won, and I'm not happy because our principles weren't met. Hey, you weren't being a good teammate today. Yeah, hey, we weren't a good teammate today. We're chasing buckets, or hey, we weren't the toughest team in the gym. We were just more talented than them. And there's games where we lost. And I'm like, hats off to us. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and look at the film and see where I could have stole 5 points, where I could have stole maybe an inbound play, or whatever the case may be. But if you just talk about leaving a game. Pride is something that I'm big on. If you could leave a game where your head held high because you know that you worked extremely hard, you guys supported your teammates, and it's like, hey, if I had a kid, I'd want my kid to be on this team. Or if I was 15, 16, 17 years old, I could play with you guys because what you guys are doing, I love it. Win, lose, or draw, that's the product you guys put out there. I fully support that.
Express to me the vibe that you have within your program.
In practice, it's extremely competitive. I mean, to the point where I have to tone some kids down. What I really love about our program, is after these crazy practices, we'll sit for an hour after practice and just chat it up about everything and anything. So we know that once we get outside of those four lines, we're brothers again. So yeah, Moody yelled at me really, really bad, but we're going to go joke around after practice and we're going to talk and we're going to make sure everything's okay. Hey, I got into it with, my point guard because he missed me on a pass, but after this, we're still really close. And, so that's really our vibe. In practice, we're super competitive. On the court, we're super competitive. We're going to yell at each other. I'm going to yell at you. If you have a disagreement, you could talk to me. You're going to yell at your teammates, whatever the case may be. But when we get outside that court, we're going to have each other's back. We're going to be supportive. We're going to have fun. And that gives you, I can't yell at a kid who I don't talk to, mm-hmm. right? You have to build that trust and that relationship. I think that's where a lot of coaches fall short is, hey, they'll yell at a kid for 2 hours and then just walk out the gym door after we break it down. If I yell at a kid, the kid who I'm toughest on, we probably have the best relationship off the court. So I think I built that trust where it's like, hey, I'm going to demand a lot for you, but off the court, if you need anything, we could talk, whether it's about school, whether it's about college, whatever the case may be. It's more than basketball, and that's why I could talk to you this way.
So you've built that moral authority. When you're fake, they know it.
Definitely.
When you're honest, they're aware of it. You obviously try to bring that every day through your program and your actions and the way that you approach the game and coaching.
If you're naturally, a really demanding guy, and that's who you are, the kids see that, and that's what you are. If you're more laid back and you're trying to be that, the kids see that, and that's not who, so it's really just, hey, be yourself. I think coaching taught me a lot about myself from your true colors show when you're coaching. When you're heat of the moment, it's the third quarter of a close game, I'm really passive aggressive at times. So in film session, it comes out. When I'm talking to refs, it comes out. So just be yourself and give the kids a space to be themselves too. First day of tryouts, kids are nervous and all this. Every tryout I've ever been a part of, it's, hey, it's important that you guys play your game, not the game you think I want you to play. Like I always say, like a good coach is like a chef. He walks into a kitchen. If he wants to make lasagna but has all the ingredients for pizza, he has to make pizza and he has to adjust. So I want you guys to be yourself. Right? So if you're a cocky kid, please go be cocky. If you're quiet, be quiet. And if you shoot 40-footers, that's what you do, right? Let me figure out how we're going to put all this together to make the best product.
As you develop your program and now coming into your second full year, how do you look at player development? How do you incorporate the younger players and build a program? How do you look at that?
Yeah, so player development is super important. Just having that environment where the kids are, like you say, challenging each other. It's really hands off with me. And, sometimes they'll ask me, hey, how do I work on my ball handling? And I could give them advice there. But it's really them taking that ownership of saying, hey, we have all the pieces to be special. We can win a league championship. We can win a state championship if we put the work in. And the kids are, so now, guess what? Come the Monday after Thanksgiving, the kids who weren't working, they're going to stand out like a sore thumb because out of the 20 kids returning between JV and varsity, 18 of them were working really hard. The 2 kids who weren't, it's going to show. And, so I'd like to say it's me being, but the most I do is I point them in directions of good coaches, whether it's AAU or trainers. But besides that, like I said, these kids are amazing. They take a lot of ownership, and it's really that culture that we built together that encourages them. One of the best things I've heard all summer, one of my assistant coaches was driving home, and he sees 3 of my kids riding bikes with basketballs in their hands. He said one had a basketball and one's holding a pizza, and I'm like, wow. 2 years ago, these kids, we couldn't get these kids to show up to practice on time. And now, we see them in the middle of the summer at the court so long that they brought lunch to the court because they're there for hours on hours and they find that joy. So, if player development, you only get in what you put out. All kids, you only get in what you put out. There's no coach who could hold your hand and make you a better player. So I think finding that culture that the kids want to get better.
In season, the way that you play sort of lends itself from that toughness factor to that energy and effort that they're giving to play a little bit more guys than maybe some other teams do. based on what they're giving you at that particular time. So you're ebbing and flowing with that effort and that output during the year, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, we had a kid last year who had a couple DNPs, who also scored 20 in a game. So it's just like having a team that is that talented, or there's that many kids who could show up on any given night with the style that we play, allows me to be flexible in terms of, all right, hey, this game we're playing against a team that's a little bigger. Let's try to go small maybe. And, so this might not be a game for this kid, even though he's really talented. And, we could just mix it up. And also showing that, like we spoke about earlier, like the freshman who's not ready to play but works really hard. We had kids like that. So it's like, hey, this kid's in foul trouble, let's throw him in. And now we're not taking as big of a drop as we thought, or a drop at all, because this kid is giving us a new look. So, just that competitive nature shows that when anybody's number is called, everybody's going to be ready.
Your last game, the loss at Pioneer, which I was able to see, tremendous effort on the part of your team in a tough environment. What was the atmosphere in the locker room at the end of that game? What was your message to the team after a great season, tournament season, really great run in the tournament, and a very close loss? What do you say to your team?
Yeah, so first I want to thank the seniors. I apologize to the seniors. I felt, once again, you lose a 1-point game. You feel like, as a player, you're thinking, I should have made that shot. As a coach, you control every part of the game. I shouldn't have subbed that kid in. I could have switched to this defense earlier. And, so I apologize to them, because I really felt like that loss was on me. Those kids, you've seen it, those kids gave me their all, and it was my job to find that extra point. And I didn't do that, so I was really apologetic for them. What are we going to do to avoid this feeling next year? And, I think they kind of knew what I was alluding to. Right? We just got to work harder, right? We got to find a way to be 2 points better, 1 point better. We got to find a way to grab that offensive rebound. We got to find a way to make that foul shot. We got to find a way. And I think that message really resonated with the kids from what I've heard this offseason, whether it's me checking on their AAU games and me seeing them in the gym. Kids, they'll send me videos of them doing hill sprints, and I'm like, all right, so you guys get it. It's not just, I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm just gonna shoot, step back threes like I'm James Harden. I'm gonna do the stuff that's not fun. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna lift. I'm gonna do box jumps. I'm gonna do hill sprints, and so I think they get that, and I think that left a sour taste in our mouth. Because it's one thing, if we were to go up there and we were to lose by 20, it's just, we weren't good enough. Losing by 1 was probably the best thing that could have happened to us.
How do you end the season, and how do you communicate preparedness for the next year?
I start to ask them questions that I start to see the wheels turn in their head. Let's say, hey, we had X amount of practices. I forgot the number, but I did the math. We had X amount of practices. How many of those practices do you feel like you're the hardest working kid in the gym, right? Has nothing to do with talent. Has nothing to do with, who made the most shots, right? Anybody could be the hardest. 4. You count on one hand. And, so having those questions, having that conversation with the kids, it shows that, all the concerns that they had were brought to my attention. But also, I think they start to realize that their concerns all tie into what I see as a coach, which is, once again, if you don't work hard, right? Hey, I ask kids, what's your goals for next season? I want to be an all-star. I want this. I want that. And then I ask you, how many practices were you the hardest working kid in the gym? And you could count on one hand.
Right.
It's like, hey, so we have to find a way for you to change what you want and really fall in love with the process. Because at the end of the day, that's what's really important. If you go and if you make 150 shots a day, just to get 10 shots in the game. If you're a good player, you get 10 shots at the high school level. If you're a really good player, you get 15 shots. But, that means you're taking thousands and thousands of shots over the summer, right? If you have a bad game, those shots didn't go to waste, right? It built character. So just realizing that you have to really love this part, right? The part that nobody sees, the part that's grimy and nasty, right? So you could get, if you want to be an all-star, you want to play in college, all that stuff. Game's only 32 minutes.
Sure.
Right? But all the hours we put in outside of the game, that's what makes those 32 minutes fun.
As a coach, just like the players, you're always developing and learning and growing. You've obviously had mentors that you look back on and say, what did they do? How did they do that? What do you do now to sort of continue that development and continue to raise your game, especially in a league where everybody now you're the team that everybody's looking to beat.
Yeah.
Right? The bullseye's on you at this point.
Yeah. So I still have a great group of mentors. A couple of the guys have access to our huddle account. So after every game, hey, can you please watch this third quarter if you don't have time to watch the whole game? And, so I still pull on those guys. Just like kids pull on me, I still have those guys that I pull on. And also developing, I coach AAU, which allows me to, this summer I coached over 80 games. From fall season to spring and summer, I coached over 80 games. So yeah, I'm a young coach, but AAU is different than high school. But however, I have 100 games under my belt. Where it's like, so just finding ways to continue to work on my craft, whether it's coaching AAU, whether it's going to a clinic, whether it's pulling on some of the mentors that I have, college coaches, high school coaches, people I met in passing. Just continue, like you said, the players work on their game. I continue to work on my game.
So at any one time, you could be watching your old huddle videos. Mm-hmm. Are you a pro guy, or are you a college guy, or are you a little bit of both in terms of what you watch on TV or go to games?
I love both. I learn a lot more from college. Mm-hmm. I think they run some really good sets. But there's nothing better than watching the best players in the world. In terms of me learning and stealing plays, and I like to take from college. I think it's a lot closer. I can't tell my kid to drive baseline and throw alley-oop because I don't have anybody who could dunk. But what I can do is, hey, we're going to run this elevator screen on this side and a back door on this side, like, a mid-major or whatever the case may be.
You're now the coach of the year, and now you have to look ahead. What's your vision of next year? Give us a preview of what you see next year from your team and your league?
I think the league's going to be really competitive. And our schedule this year, we loaded up. Last year, we played 20 regular season games. Out of those 20 regular season games, all but 4 were playoff teams, and only 2 were Division 5 teams. Right? So we're playing against, we played Lynn English, who was arguably one of the best teams in the state. We just really played a really, really tough schedule, and that prepared us for whatever we'll see, because we know, hey, this team is supposed to be a really good shooting team. Guess what? We played this team who is known for that. This team has size. We played this team who has 2 6'8" guys. So I think packing our schedule is going to be really good. But I think the CAC as a whole is going to be really good again this year.
So you're really looking towards the tournament and being tournament ready.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, like we talked about being prepared earlier. And there's no replacement for seeing it. I want to make sure that the next time we see a team like we did this season in the playoffs, instead of it being a 1-point loss, hey, we've been there already. We know what that feels like. We ran into this type of team. We know how to handle that situation. So if that comes with, another 12-8 record, I'm okay with that, because those 12 wins and those 8 losses were against some really, really tough teams.
Your passion is obviously basketball. If you had to choose between playing and coaching, what would be your choice?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. So early on, there were some games where I'm like, oh my gosh, like the atmosphere. It's like, oh, I want to lace them up. And, I miss that. But I'm having a lot of fun coaching. So much fun coaching.
Lakers or Celtics?
Celtics.
Bird or Magic?
Magic.
Zone or man?
Man.
What's the one parting advice that you can give a new coach, maybe a JV coach like yourself, that wants to be a head coach, or is that assuming that head coach position? What's your best advice?
Like I said, wherever you're at, treat it like the big leagues. Like it matters. You may think it doesn't matter. You're playing a 5 o'clock game, or now these JV games are even earlier. You're playing a 4 o'clock game in front of 2 teachers and 8 parents. It matters. So, treat that like you will treat a varsity game or a college game or an NBA game if you're on the sidelines. It matters.
Moody Bey, Coach of the Year, Kip Academy. Best of luck on the season to come and in the future.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. you.